Hannah! How you doing?
Good, how are you?
Good to see you. Thanks for making your way through here from far travel today. We don't often get visitors from afar.
Oh,
Where are
I
you
can
from?
imagine. Dumbarton.
Dumbarton, wow. I used to go on my holidays to Helensburgh. In fact,
Still
I'd
do.
still go on holiday to Helensburgh. Sounds quite good. Got a lot of relatives down that way, but we'll not go down that road.
We'll be here all day.
So we're here as you and I as Ringwood representatives on the Ringwood channel here. And the reason I wanted to chat to you was to give me some insight. It's going to sound as though I'm asking you questions that I might know the answer to. And the truth is, I don't know. I don't know the answer. Definitely not. So you're really dealing with the beginner's course here, okay? So your position with Ringwood, tell us about that.
Yeah, so I've got a few, so I'm unfortunately your support intern.
Fortunate for me.
I'm the assistant submissions manager, so I deal with all the Ringwood submissions and organise what stages and stuff that they're in and keep track of the database.
Okay.
And I'm also a main editor for one of our upcoming books.
Okay, so let's go through them. Firstly, Ringwood, for anybody wondering about Ringwood, what's your understanding of Ringwood's ethos then, where they're coming from? You've been with the company now about 8 months?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. One of our longest serving interns,
yes.
I would suggest.
Uh-huh.
So tell us about that internship, how that came about.
Yeah, so it was partly because I couldn't find anything after uni.
What did you study, Hannah?
Career-wise. So I did English literature and creative writing.
Okay.
So I moved back home and was kind of at my slim pickings moment. So I started looking online for closer internships and stuff.
So you want to get into publishing?
Yes.
Is that what you've always wanted to do?
Yeah, so it used to be I wanted to be a writer, and
Right.
then that progressed once I started doing my creative writing course into editing itself.
Right.
Because I had to work in groups and edit other people's work.
Okay, and you found that you had a...
Yeah, I found that more fun than writing my own stuff.
Right, and if something's fun, you'll be good at it as well, and that's half the battle. Okay, so you came out of uni and thought publishing, there's got to be a route here for me that I can do that and get paid at the same time.
That was the plan.
Yeah. And is it hard to get into the publishing industry then?
It's very hard, but the climate and everything right now, COVID and everything happening, it's hard to get in any.
Yes,
at the
that's
moment.
true.
But yeah, publishing is getting a bad rep as well at the moment in terms of wage and salaries. So a lot of it is underpaid.
Because there's so much competition for jobs?
It's partly because there's so much competition that publishing houses think they can get away with the low pay, but it's also just because they're not doing great at the percentage differences when it comes to splitting up the income. So your higher ups are getting the big percentage while your lower ones are getting less.
And we had Sandy Jimison, the CEO of Ringwood in here, and he was saying that as these big publishers get bigger and bigger, the likes of Ringwood get squeezed out of the marketplace altogether, and they control more and more and more of the marketplace. It's just market forces, really.
It doesn't help that the biggest houses are buying off all the little ones as well.
Right.
Like Bonnier Books and stuff is now owned by Penguin, I think it is.
Okay.
But yeah, so all the little independent ones are getting now bought over, which is good for them because they get more funding and stuff, but at the same time it's not as good for us trying to get in, and even for authors in general as well. They find that it's harder because all these houses are now getting more submissions, and they need to stay within their bracket so that they're still relevant for the bigger house to keep them on board.
And people sell books, celebrity sells books as well, so it becomes a smaller and smaller pool, if you like, and less space for the first time author or for the niche author that's writing about things that are maybe different from the mainstream, not crime. I was in Waterson's yesterday and I discovered that crime novels are the most stolen by shoplifters off the shelves. Yeah, I thought that was quite interesting. They steal the books to learn how to do it.
Yeah. Better way to get away with crime.
Yeah. So you came across Ringwood. Did you know someone in Ringwood, or had you any previous knowledge?
No. Well, I had came across them a few years ago when I was previously looking for different internships and stuff, and I ended up getting work experience with Louvre Press instead.
Okay.
But that unfortunately got
cancelled.
Publisher? Yes, so
right.
they're based in Edinburgh. They're great, very Scottish-based literature and stuff from them. They're actually doing really well with their Scots and their Gaelic books. That's what's rising with them
their
for
thing.
now.
Yeah.
So that's great. And then after I finished uni and stuff and I was looking for the next steps, I was like, right, let's go back and see who we've already looked at and that. And it just so happened that I had emailed at the perfect time that another intern was just leaving.
Right.
So I managed to steal their wee spot.
Sandy told me just today that that cycle of interns is kind of 6 monthly interviewing, just for anybody that's thinking about looking for an internship. Ringwood tend to recruit interns every 6 months. They go through that process because you're always planning to replace, because the average lifespan of an intern is about 8 or 9 months, apparently, because they move on and get a job.
Yeah.
And that's the whole idea that Sandy explained to us, that you get some experience of the different things that you're doing with Ringwood. You also get that on your CV, which is legitimate if you're any good at it. Then, you don't want people saying she was a rubbish editor. And that can help you get in, that could be the difference to get into the marketplace and get a job.
Yeah, it definitely is.
So you'd recommend an internship?
Oh yeah, if you can. Preferably do it while you're still at uni over summer or something. I think that would be the perfect spot, because that was originally my plan. I was supposed to have the Louvre Press internship and then go to New York for an internship with Blue Life Media.
Okay.
But both of them get cancelled because of the pandemic.
Right. Okay.
So yeah.
So it's having all these irons in the fire as well.
Yeah.
Somebody told me once, getting a job is a job.
Yeah.
And it really is. You need to keep plugging away.
Yeah, because it's even just within retail, for example, they want you to have like 2 years experience for just a normal job, and you're like, that's not feasible.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's the same with publishing. However, publishing's get that lovely little, you don't need experience, but if you've got it.
Of course.
But everything's going to be like that.
It's going to put you up the queue. So how do you sustain yourself then with Ringwood? Because you don't get paid at all as an intern.
Yeah, so it's all unpaid volunteering.
Okay.
So I've just got a wee part-time job in an Asda bakery.
Right. And you stay at home?
Yeah. Saving the money is by not renting.
Yeah, until you make that move.
Yeah.
And have you got irons in the fire just now then for jobs?
Well, hopefully I've got one lined up for down in London, but I have to hand in samples of my writing and stuff before I get a yes or a no. So we'll see how that goes.
Good luck with that.
Thank you.
Be bad luck for me if you get it.
You'll need to train somebody else to deal with.
Because the first role that you mentioned there that you do for Ringwood is look after an author. And you must have really impressed when you got interviewed for the Ringwood job to get allocated me.
Oh yes.
Yes.
Of course.
I don't know if that's true or not, or whether it was a punishment. This old teacher, she thinks she wants to get into publishing. So what do you do for the authors then? And is it tailored specifically for that particular author and their book?
Well, it depends. One, it depends on the offer, and two, it depends on the intern.
Right.
So at the moment with Blooming Ringwood and stuff, it's a lot of launches that are going on.
Yes.
So
this is our springtime initiative. Yeah. All the launches and events are going on.
Yeah. So you'll have interns that are showing off the new books and hyping them up and stuff.
Yes. Across social media.
They'll be trying to get reviewers and critics and stuff to read them, preferably before publication date.
Right.
And they'll be trying to get them in newspapers and stuff.
Okay. Interviews, whatever. Yeah. And deal with the launch event itself.
Yeah.
Okay. So the intern does all of that, or as much as the author wants them to do, really. Yeah. It's a partnership.
Yeah. So essentially, some authors will just be like, just do your own thing, it's fine, much like you do. And some will be very much, can you try do this for me, and can you do this, and give them like a wee list. And for the most part, it works. It also depends on outward circumstances. For example, trying to book places, someone can have their heart set on Waterstones and it's just not feasible.
It's not going to happen.
Yeah. But yeah, it's that, just the to and fro that comes with it, but it's something that we'll need to learn if we want to work in publishing anyway, because there's going to be a lot of to and fro with managers and such, but also with the authors that we're going to be working with.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So the authors then, let's look at the authors, because the people that watch this, we can only think, either aspire to get into the publishing industry, and we're going to cover some of those topics with you today. But for the most part, it's authors who think that the work has got some merit and they want to submit it. And you said you were head of submissions. Assistant head.
Yes.
Oh, where's the head? Get the head in here. So, can you take us through the submissions process? Because I'm an author, strangely. I've got a published book, but I've got absolutely no idea how that got through a process or what that process is. I just sent it in. Sandy said, send me it, and a few months later he phoned me up and said, we want to publish your book. And that's when the work started, because the editing process then started. But let's go right back to that submission then. Firstly, how do Ringwood get submissions? Where do they come from?
Yeah, so on Ringwood's site there's the submissions email.
Ringwood.com?
Yes.
Okay.
And the submissions emails is something just like ringwood@submissions.com.
Yeah, the other way around probably.
Yeah.
I know what you mean. Yeah. That's the
so,
first test for them to see if they can figure that button out.
Yep. So the authors just email in their books, poems, blah blah blah.
So they send the whole thing in?
Preferably. Some only send in a couple chapters, but we prefer to have a full manuscript for us to review. So we will generally email back and say, can we get a full
So if it's a full manuscript, is it... I've forgotten what I was going to ask about that full manuscript here. Is it going to be read in full? Is the full manuscript better than a first 3 chapters or 5 or a synopsis of the book? The full book's the thing to send in?
Preferably, yeah. So what we'll find the most is that we'll get a author biography, which is a must. So a little... About
themselves,
where they're
first time author, blah blah blah.
Any other books.
I'm writing from prison, I've been in prison for 30 years.
But do you know what? That would be a great book.
I'll bear that in mind if I get caught.
Stealing your own book from Waterstones.
Hey, you caught that right away. She's got some mind, hasn't she?
So...
we can cut this. He doesn't have to worry about people stealing his book at Waterstones.
It's missing. They couldn't find it. The manager said we couldn't find it. And he said it's maybe been misplaced. And it couldn't have been, because I've been everywhere in that shop.
Yeah, it was misplaced.
And he said, it's been stolen. And that's when he told me that crime books are the most stolen in the shop.
More likely people bring them back.
And she's just clocked it was me that stole it. It was in my bag all along. To make him reorder it. And now I've got an event in the office. I wish I'd thought I'm going to go around and steal it for everyone else now. Right, where were we? I've no idea. Submissions we're talking about?
So if they email in an author biography, a synopsis can be helpful, at least for the initial stage that we go through, and then the full manuscript. Partly the full manuscript just so that we don't need to then email and ask for it. If we've just got it handy and in the bank, then it's easier.
Okay.
But by all means, if you don't want a synopsis, then just send in a chapter or two.
So a full manuscript, we're talking anything from 80,000 words to 120, 140,000 words?
Yeah. Can be shorter than that as well.
And do you read the whole thing?
You do when you get to stage 2 of the review process.
So tell us about stage 1.
So the very first stage is essentially me and Radula, the main manager.
The person that should be here today, yes.
But you get slim pickings. We'll double check that it meets Ringwood's criteria, which is that the book has a connection to Scotland and that the author has a connection to Scotland, so that they've lived or are currently lived in Scotland. So that's the first thing, and as long as it meets those criteria, it gets put into stage 1. Right. So then stage 1 is 2 or 3 interns will read, say, about half of it. Okay. And they'll decide if it has any merit.
Interns do that?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we'll decide if it has any merit, and kind of make notes on how we think it would do for Ringwood, if it is a Ringwood book or if it's better off with another publisher.
What would make it not a Ringwood book?
Well, we've had a few that's been...
Rubbish.
No. There's...
I know you have.
Yeah.
Yeah, but what would make it a children's books? We don't...
Yeah,
I've
so
never been a Ringwood children's book.
Ringwood doesn't do children's poetry, short stories, or...
Fantasy
and sci-fi.
Sci-fi as well.
So they are two that we're interested in getting into, but we haven't found one that's...
What, the fantasy sci-fi?
Yeah, we haven't found one that can
Huge marketplace.
It is. It's one that's missed in Scotland quite a lot. Yeah.
Okay, that's something that we'll need to look at then.
Yeah, but it's... in terms of if we think a book or a manuscript has made it to stage 1 and we think it's a good book but it's not quite Ringwood, usually it's more like a Saraband kind of book or something. We'll read it and we'll say that book should be in another publisher that we know of.
Right.
And if that thought comes in, then we'll make a note of it, but we'll still say yes or no, we should look at it further.
Okay.
So if it gets...
So stage 2 is 2 or 3 interns?
Yeah.
2 or 3?
So it's usually 2 make the actual decision. They'll review it and then there'll be a third person that will just be a tiebreaker, or in terms of if it's me
if one likes it and one doesn't, sort of thing. Yeah.
In terms of me and Medulla, we'll just give them like a wee scan through as well, just to make sure that it is a Ringwood book essentially. And we'll take on the notes that the other ones have said and just be like, right, okay.
So what's the criteria when you're reading it then? Is it the grammar? Is it the spelling? Is it the layout? Is that important? What are the important things for prospective authors to look at?
When we get to the next stage is when we start doing reviews as well, so that's an even more in-depth review process essentially. So this is when it gets
So you're not accepted yet?
You're still not accepted.
You don't know anything about this. How long does this process take?
So to get to this stage, for the readers' reports to get done, it's usually about 4 to 6 months.
Right.
But we're struggling with a wee bit of a backlog at the moment, so it's more to about 6 to 8 months. Because
the author's heard nothing in this period?
No.
They've sent a transcript in?
Yeah.
Would you recommend an author to send a transcript to as many publishing houses as he likes then? Yeah. Because of this process?
Yeah, and if it gets accepted by another publisher, then to email the ones that you have emailed
and let them know to stop.
Yeah, because there's been quite a few lately that we've gotten to and we're like, yes, this is a great book, we need this, and we email the author being like, it's been moved on to the next stage, and they're like, oh, I've already self-published or I've
sold it, or signed a contract.
And you're like, okay, we'll take you off the database.
Okay, so that's important then.
Yeah.
Maybe we should keep in touch with authors then while we're going through that process.
We need to try that. That should be something I should be working on. But the amount of submissions that we're getting in at the moment, because everybody's just decided right now during spring's the time to hand in a manuscript.
And they've been writing them during lockdown and all that. They've all been coming together.
It's that way where I'm trying to get through them to say yes or no for them moving on to that stage, the first stage, and da-da-da-da. So it's just that juggle. But we will sort it out once we've got a better kind of flow.
Yeah. I think everywhere's struggling with this just now. It's a volume. Mm-hmm. So I've got through the first stage. You and another intern have said, hey, this is okay.
Yeah.
If it could be tidied up and the dates changed and the spelling changed as far as I was concerned. But you like the idea of it, and it fits into the Ringwood umbrella, if you like, maybe a memoir or something about Scotland or whatever it might be, a crime book. Fiction now, we're doing a lot of crime fiction and historical fiction too. So there's lots of genres in there, and other genres that we would look at if we thought they had merit, I know that. So where does it then go?
So then we get onto the reports, and that'll be 3, sometimes 4. Interns will do a report on it.
Right, so independently?
So they'll look
the 2 that looked at it initially? And another 2?
Yeah.
Okay.
So they'll look at how much editing work it needs. If it's more, it needs edited or it needs rewritten.
Okay.
Which is a big chunk. We'll also look at the markability of the book, how Ringwood could sell it, how an author could sell it, what brackets and genres and stuff it comes under.
Okay.
We look at its specific niche to see if it's too small a niche or too big a niche, because Ringwood likes to get that lovely little middle bracket where it's one that a big publisher wouldn't take,
Right.
but not one that would fly too far under the radar.
Right.
So
Yes.
yeah, so we'll look at those sort of stuff, and we'll look at just plot and like the consistency and stuff to make sure that those things don't need too much work either. Because you'll find that a lot of the way you'll be reading through a book and then a character's name just changes.
Right.
So it's stuff like this that you're looking out for. Is there something that's more complex that needs to get
Continuity.
fixed?
Yeah.
And then just your overall thoughts as well in general, which is usually your start and your introduction is, I think Ringwood should publish this, or I don't think Ringwood should publish this because, and then it'll be your own thoughts on it, what you liked about it, what you
And
didn't
who
like
you reporting
about it.
to?
This goes to the editorial committee.
Right.
So that's
the board.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they'll do a meeting usually about every 3 months,
Okay.
and it'll be all the reports that have been done for different books. Will get discussed, and then during
Did
that
they
meeting,
read the transcripts then?
yeah.
So if it's gone through stage 2, you do a report on it, and at that stage they'll read your report and the book, the manuscript.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so the editorial committee will then essentially sit down and discuss each book, their own thoughts and stuff on it, as
Okay.
well as tying in with the reports to see what everybody else is thinking of it. And then we'll make the decision then and there on whether the book gets published or Ringwood.
It's a wonder a book ever gets published at all,
I
isn't
know,
it?
I know.
Especially yours.
I'm still worried
My
about
best
that
selling, Ringwood bestseller. It's a great doorstop. It really is a good doorstop. Isn't
one. I
it?
don't know, there's thicker books.
You know, use mine for your doorstop.
No?
It's its main selling
You
point.
read it?
Yeah?
Cut that out right away. So, it's now got to the committee. Is it out of the intern's hands then at that point?
Yeah, so once the reports are done, they get sent to Medulla, and then Medulla sends them to the committee. So
Okay,
she'll have her...
because she's in charge of submissions. Right. The real person.
Yeah.
Yeah. So at that point, the board get involved. So by the time they see a manuscript, they know that you guys think it's a Ringwood book, think it's publishable, and think that it doesn't need too much work editorial. It certainly doesn't need rewritten. It's got some merit at this point. And you've got it in a category as a memoir or whatever it might be. And you've done 4 or 5 reports on it.
Yeah.
Intern reports, which will be different because everybody comes at it from their own angle. Okay, so then the editorial team get it every 3 months, and if they want to publish it, does it come back to you guys?
No, so once it's agreed that it'll get published or not, I'll take the list down and I'll email the authors what the result
At
is.
this point, you want them to say, good,
Yeah.
I've not done it already.
Yeah. And then it just goes over to Sandy, who deals with the contracts and the rights and everything for all the books.
That's Sandy Jimison. Okay.
And then he just hands out whatever manuscript it is to a different intern to start on the editing process.
Right, so it's in Sandy's hands at that point
Yeah.
then, and he determines which intern might be best for that author, etc., etc.
Yeah.
Okay. Is that the submission process then? Is there anything
Yeah.
we're missing in there that might be important for an author that's looking to submit work to Ringwood?
To Ringwood? No, I don't think so. Other than just to make sure that you have a Scottish connection, that your book's got a Scottish connection, and that it's not poetry, short stories or children's.
What about some of the technicalities then, Hannah? I used to do court reports, and I still do the odd lawyers' reports for murder cases and things. And the lawyer will, I know exactly what they want. They want a gap at the top for notes. They want double space, and they want a big margin there and a gap at the bottom, because they're going to write all over it, and they need space to do that.
Yeah.
What would the ideal manuscript be? What font would it be? What?
It doesn't really matter as long as the font is readable. It's the same as handwriting. You wouldn't
So
hand
printed.
in. Yeah.
So printed,
Yeah. So you want it.
preferably.
Yeah. It'll be emailed anyway, so it doesn't matter too much as long as it's not like a cartoon font or something like that.
Right, okay, Roman italics or something
yeah,
like that.
just
Yeah.
something normal that's readable. And generally, most people.
Do you make notes on it?
No. So we try to keep it clear until you become the editor.
Right.
So the layout and stuff doesn't necessarily matter as long as it's not like, say you've got one chapter there and then it's like 3 pages until the next chapter.
Okay.
You want it to be easy to read, something that we can just immediately just look at and just...
So it's common sense, really. You want it to be comfortable for you to sit and read it.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of page numbers.
Yeah, if you're being an abstract writer as well, and you've got...
That's me.
Well, yeah. And you like playing with layout, that is fine as long as it's understandable that that's what you're going for.
Yes.
If it does seem like it's just random bits of writing here, there and everywhere, then we will be a bit more like, well, what's going on? But again,
there's
that's
a bit of common sense here. Yeah, it's like a CV, that there's a layout, and apparently that catches the eye first and foremost, that part of the A4 page.
Yeah.
So that's common sense, that you want to lay it out so that you guys can read it comfortably and print it off comfortably. Yeah. Nothing about format or anything then in the PDF?
All of that gets handled towards the end.
Okay. So it's what's written, whether it's got merit or not initially. That's the important thing. Okay, so we've got it now that the board have said, yes, we like this. Mm-hmm. You've called the author and he said, fantastic. Mm-hmm. What do we do now?
Yeah.
What's the answer? Because I thought my book would be on the shelf next week when Sandy told me that. We're going to do your book. And that was April or something. We launched it in September, I think.
Yeah. Well, it's George that I'm working with just now. I took his book on last year.
You've got another author?
Yeah.
For goodness, I thought you were mine.
Have you got a book for me to edit?
Two-timing.
To edit? No.
Well then.
Yeah.
So I've been editing his book since, I don't know, August or something like that.
Must be rubbish.
And we're still going through the process.
What's the book?
So
Has it got a name yet?
It's called Lanarkshire's Chronicles for now, so that's its working title.
Is this George, ex-policeman George?
Yeah.
Ah, brilliant.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
So I'm working through his. So that's
that
probably why I get stuck with you.
On Facebook.
Yeah.
George puts this stuff on Facebook on some of the police sites, and it's fascinating. It really is some of the historic stories. You've been reading them.
I know, it is.
And I said to him on Facebook, I said to him on Facebook, have you thought about publishing any of this stuff about? And he said, I wouldn't know where to start. So I introduced him to Sandy.
Yeah.
And Sandy obviously went through the process that you've just described. George Barnsley.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's brilliant. That's great, because the stories are tremendous.
Yeah, they're really good.
And you get to read that for nothing.
I get to read that for nothing.
Sorry, right. So what process? Where are you in the process with George's book?
Yeah, so we had a rough start, to be fair, at the beginning. Just me trying to figure out what I was doing in general. Cause
you were new?
I was new. And I was just... Sandy handed me the book and said I was the assistant editor and I was to make some notes and then send them back. So once I managed to do that and I put all my notes and my thoughts and everything down, Sandy then came back to me and said, that's exactly what I was thinking, just you take charge.
Right.
So I was now editor. So I had a bit of like what do you do? So we finally got started. I would say it was about December is when we actually started making progress.
Right.
And now we're still at the stage where it's little individual stories that he sent, and I'm just helping him like tweak little bits and like add his own little comments for some parts.
Okay.
So say for one of them there's like a funny incident. One of them was the police went to stop a illegal boxing fight and there was thousands in the crowd and they saw the police officers and they all just turned and ran away.
Yeah.
And they were like,
which one do you chase?
Yeah. So I was like, put in a wee funny joke there or something. Yeah. So that's essentially just what I'm doing at the moment. Is just add a little comment here, make a wee joke, blah blah blah.
It was a part of the editing process that I knew nothing about it. It's first time, Hannah. But the editors never changed a word that edited my book. I never knew you then. I should make that clear. But they suggested that maybe you could do this or maybe you could do that. The biggest one was that my book started off and it was about where I was born and football and stuff like that. And it didn't mention the police. And one of the editors said, why don't you put a wee short story at the start to let people know where it's going? And that was brilliant. So I just wrote a wee 2-page thing about a car chase that I was involved in. Yeah. And everybody knows then where it's going to end up, you know. So that was good. Yeah. But that was the process that nobody told me what to do.
Yeah.
Other than Sandy, he said there's one chapter in there that we really need to think about. You know me, my casual sexism. So we did that. So you've done that, doing that along with the author.
Mm-hmm.
Is the whole book written though?
Yeah, so we've got...
It's got a start, a middle and an end now.
Yeah, essentially. So it's still very much little short stories, but we've got a structure for how they're all going.
When they fit together. Is
So
it chronological then?
So we're going to do, it's split by themes, and then each story goes chronologically in those themes.
Excellent.
So we've got like murder, robbery, that sort of stuff.
Drinking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Preaching the peace, all those ones.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting. We've got a vague introduction from him as well that we'll get him to work on too, and then we'll get a wee conclusion. But the plan is there's two stories, there's two officers that is essentially the reason why George is doing the book.
Yeah.
So we're putting them at the end, and it's going to be like a nice little tie-up dedication. Essentially, it's two officers that he thinks deserve more recognition for their actions. So all the wee stories lead up to that, and it's really interesting. Good. So once we get it actually cemented on one Word document, then it'll just be bingo bango from there, essentially.
Excellent. How long?
So we should have
you said that's going to launch. It's coming up, isn't it?
Yeah, so the launch should be in about October.
Okay.
So it should all be combined by June, and then in June it'll just be a couple of little niggly bits that will need sorted.
Okay.
And then it'll get passed on to proofreaders and stuff to see if there's anything we've
Which
missed.
is another part, proofreading and the cover and all that jazz that goes on in the background, the legal stuff as well. If it's police stories, sometimes you need to be careful there. Illustrations maybe, photographs, I don't know, there's all that other stuff. So yours is your intern for George, or are you his intern as well?
Well, because his book isn't actually published yet or launching, he's not got an actual intern, but so I'm just editing, and Jasmine is the assistant editor.
So you're author, intern, and you're now editing the book and dealing with submissions, assistant submissions, manager, person. And that's it. How much time does all that take? So I'm usually about 15 to 20 hours a week, because I've also got a part-time job. Of course.
So it's when you do your interview with Sandy, he'll ask how many hours can you work, essentially, and he'll give you a range that's usually between like 10 to 15, 15 to 20, blah blah blah, and it's just whatever you can do. Is what you do. There's no written agreement or anything that you have to do those times either. No. It's very loose.
And Ringwood is like that, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I don't know about you, I think I say this every time I speak about him. I hope he never watches this, because I'll deny it. The great thing about Sandy and all the Ringwood staff that I've met and board that I've met is they are honest.
Yeah.
Dead up front. And and it's important for the interns and the authors to be the same and just tell it as it is, because we're all trying to do the same thing. So when we come to the book comes out, are you involved in the marketing end at all?
A good possibility if I'm still in Ringwood.
Right. Well, there's a very good possibility, because I've just been appointed in charge of social media and marketing. Not words that really roll off my tongue.
No, I can see that.
And I want you to be my assistant in that endeavour, because you can say the words and you know what they mean. So hopefully you don't get that job down south. Are you up for that?
Yeah.
God. There's lots of people out there got material.
Yeah.
You mentioned self-publishing. To your mind, what are the drawbacks of self-publishing now? Because that's quite a process that this book's going through.
To be honest, the drawback for self-publishing is the developmental editing and proofreading. So a lot of self-publishers will get heat for some typos and mistakes and stuff.
Okay.
Because
it's hard to self-edit, isn't it?
It's hard to be strict on yourself.
Yes.
With that, but it's also a lot of freelance editors and stuff can be a bit expensive.
Yes.
As well, especially for a full manuscript to get either edited or proofread.
And that's assuming that you find a legitimate one, because there's so many scams out there as well, so it's quite a risky business.
Yeah.
And they can charge thousands.
Yeah.
So and you've still got the cover to do, and you've still got all the legals and all the rest of it to register the book and everything else. Yeah.
One of the good things to look out for when looking for a freelance editor or proofreader is that they can get certificates for them, which is so they're qualified and they can help. They will know what they're doing to help.
So the certificates for being
so editors, you can just do them online. Some can be a bit expensive, but generally...
Sorry, to get the certificate?
Yeah,
you can do a course online? Right, got it.
But there will be cheaper ones, and it's just, essentially most of them get done in like less than 6 months, if you've got the time to sit down.
Yes, it's all down to how much you put into it.
Yeah. But yeah, so they're really helpful for one, spying good quality freelancers, but also if you're interested in doing freelance yourself.
Do you do any work out with Ringwood then, any paid work for editing, because you're qualified to do it?
Yeah, so I've got my own wee website, which is a helping quill.
ahelpingquill.com?
.co.uk.
Okay.
But yeah, so that's just, I do copy editing and freelancing. Although,
what do you mean by freelancing?
Copy editing and proofreading.
Proofreading, yeah.
I would put up for developmental editing, but I don't actually have a certificate for it.
Okay.
So I feel like most people wouldn't trust me on that, so I don't put it up.
Tell me the difference.
So your developmental editing is your first stage of editing. Right. So that's when somebody will get essentially a second or third draft of a manuscript, and they'll make comments and suggestions for things that could use work. They'll look at the plot, they'll look at characters and make sure that they're not 2D and stuff like that. They'll build it up essentially, and then your copy editor is just somebody that goes through and checks for things that could be fixed but don't need fixed, if that makes sense. You also have your line editors as well, so they go through each individual line and make sure that words and your sentences all work. Make sure that it all flows and you don't have any chunky bits.
It's worth mentioning that process you're talking about, Ringwood pride themselves in that process. They're a small publisher in the big scheme of things, and their marketing side, there's no big budget there to market books, but where they do excel is in the actual book they produce. You believe that? It's true.
It is.
Yeah. It's well proofread, it's well edited, and it's well presented. So it's a small amount of books perhaps in the big scheme of things, a dozen a year or whatever, but they're quality books by Scottish or Scottish connected authors.
With one exception.
I'll not mention him. I'll be lucky if I ever sell another book after this.
Because they're all going to
buy
get
it out of
stolen.
novelty. Listen, if I can write a book, anybody can write a book, that's for sure. That process with Charlie, with George that you're going through, that's pretty much how my book evolved. It was just wee stories. And Sandy said, write some more. That's all I ever said, was write some more. And eventually I had to think, how am I going to join these up? And I went for the chronological through my career and split it into three different locations. And only then did the structure, I would say at least 3/4 of the book was written before I knew what the structure was going to be at the end of it. And that was with help from interns and whatnot, all of our input to help bring the best book out that we could. And it's only once you brought it out, once it's printed, and I had hundreds of them in my house when they arrived, it's only then that you realise that process is final. What's coming out is your book. And the reason you do it is so there's a legacy and so there's something, when you're not here, it's here. And you realise the importance of all that proofreading and editing and everything else, because it's not going anywhere now. You can get another edition, but that's the original book right there. It's fascinating. How many then books that come through, submissions that are made to you, don't make it?
Well, our last editorial committee, which was February, we looked at 6 books, I think, and none got through.
None?
None.
Wow.
So it was...
So that was 6, they didn't get to the board?
No, they got to the board.
Right.
We all just agreed during the meeting that it wasn't...
They weren't worth doing.
So it is, sometimes you'll get books that will pass stage 1 because we read, say, half of the book.
Yes.
So then when you get to stage 2, the full book gets read, and then we realise the conclusion isn't there.
Yeah.
Or this doesn't actually tie up with that, and that's when you realise that there is still all these plot holes and stuff.
That's interesting. So what percentage in a year, how many submissions do you think we get in a year? Maybe it's a bit off with the COVID and all the rest of it.
I
best
don't know.
guess?
Over 100 I would have to say anyway,
Right.
at least on the database we've got just now.
Okay, and how many do Ringwood publish in a year? I think it's about 8. Maybe a dozen this year.
Yeah, it's about a dozen, yeah.
So it's about 10%.
Yeah.
It's funny. I wrote a book.
He's quite good at that, isn't he?
The 10%. My next one's the 9%. It's part of the sequence. Do you know the next one? I can actually attest to that process a wee bit. I was thinking back to when my book was being edited. Sandy explained that the first editorial job was to look at the whole book. Not to look at individual sentences or paragraphs or stories, to look at the whole book and see if it had a natural flow and beginning and end.
Yeah.
And that was the first editorial job, to tidy that up. And that's when I had to take a chapter out and stuff like that, you know, to make sure there was no controversy, that I didn't end up in jail. And then it starts to come down, and I think it was split between 2 editors that were doing 2 different things, really. So it's a really tight process.
Yeah.
But it's an inevitable process. It seems strange that somebody can write something and 18 months later it might come out in print.
Yep.
And that 90% of them don't come out. Through us anyway.
Yeah.
Somebody else might pick them up. Because another 10% of them might just not be Ringwood books.
Yeah.
But they might go somewhere else. They might still be good. Do you ever have to say to an author, it's not very good?
No.
No.
I just say, yes, it's going through, or sorry, it's not going past this stage.
Right. They don't get any feedback.
No.
Because that's what they all want, don't they?
Yeah.
And see, when you're writing it, you're always looking for positive assertion that you're, because it's a lonely, lonely place. Have you written anything?
Yeah. I've written a few things, yeah.
Right. And it's a lonely place.
Trying
to assess it and think, is this any good?
Yeah.
I think most stuff probably ends up in the bin.
Oh, yeah.
Because the author's lack of confidence to say, have a look at that. And I could have chucked it when I showed my sister and my brother and my son, because they were all plaguing me to know what it was about. And so I sent them each a wee bit, and my son marked it as if he was my teacher, right, with red ink on the computer. It was all red, and he picked me up on all the PC stuff. I couldn't say that. No, you can't say that. Can't say that.
Yeah.
No, that's out of date. No. So I just ignored him completely. Like he's been doing with me for 38 years. My brother came back and slated me for it was too serious for him. And my sister was the worst of all. My sister in Brisbane in Australia. She did the worst thing that anybody can do for any budding artist, author, musician. She ignored it completely. Nothing. So if you could chuck it, that's where you would chuck it.
Yeah.
Is asking other people's opinion. Because you're asking opinions of people who have no idea what it is that you're trying to do and how to do it, and who have never done it.
Yeah. It's also imposter syndrome just in itself. It's every author's struggle that, one, that's good enough, and two, that they're good enough.
Yes, I'm worthy. I'm not
so
worthy.
It's that way where like they'll be writing or they've finished a book, and as they're editing or just reading over it, they're just like, this isn't good, this is terrible, and they just don't have that confidence to switch their brain and be like, no, I am a writer. I've written a book, it's right in front of me.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's one thing that a lot of writers need to overcome.
And one of the big things is I had to read my book about 10 times before it came out. I was bored, silly, reading it, because the editors kept coming back with stuff and I had to read it again. I know how this ends. So it is a real process, and that's where the self-doubt, and there's a wee bit where the self-publishing must be so difficult, because my book would never have been finished if I didn't have somebody to tell me it was.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because you can always change this, and you remember things that you forgot while you were writing it, and other things that crop up, and life goes on. So it's a bit like a painting, knowing when it's finished, like a song, knowing when it's done.
Yeah.
It needs somebody else to say, that's it, it's over.
Yeah, it is. It's hard.
The end. hardest words.
Yeah, it's hard for people, especially like as they've went through the process and stuff, and more ideas keep coming to them and stuff, to just want to squeeze them in. It's like the same as if sometimes someone will be like doing their makeup or something, and they'll finished it and they're like, right, okay, that looks good, and then they just turn around and there's that one little bit of eyeshadow or something. They're like,
I'm not sure what. Chris will know what you're talking about.
I know.
Yeah.
But they'll just be like, no, yeah, I need that on. So then it just
before
ruins.
you know it, you're Alice Cooper.
Yeah. And you're just like, what have I done? So it's that way we're like, you just need to know enough's enough. But
and sometimes less is more.
Yeah.
Yeah. And sometimes you need to hold it back for the next book.
Exactly.
Bet you hadn't asked me that. I told him when to stop.
See what I mean? That's brilliant, Hannah. I'm really, I'm looking forward to listening to this and find out all that stuff that I've missed. That process. It's
I'm
really
just
interesting.
happy I was able to speak this time.
I know, you get tongue-tied on that Zoom. But hopefully we can get some other interns in. Mm-hmm. You can line them up for me and tell me who, and maybe get an editor. I think's the obvious one for next, isn't it? Or your boss in submissions and find out what the stuff you didn't know.
Yeah.
But if we get some from editorial and one of the board, maybe something like that, we'll keep plugging away. Because I want people to understand that process. Mm-hmm. If you understand where your manuscript's going, and I think that will help you do it because you know it's got a home to go to at the end. It's not just a hit or a miss.
Yeah.
And on Twitter and whatnot, you'll see it the same as me. There's stacks of folk out there writing stuff.
Oh yeah.
And they haven't got a clue what they're going to do with it once it's written, which is a shame because a lot of it's got merit.
Yeah.
And we should all get to hear these stories. Brilliant, Hannah. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
And good luck getting home to Dumbarton.
Oh, thanks. Appreciate it.